Okay, so get ready for a deep dive into a mystery that's honestly a bit unsettling.
Yeah.
The smiley face killer theory.
Hmm.
Makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
If there's like a darker side to all those missing person cases we always hear about.
Right.
The source today is an article from the lineup, and it's called The Smiley Face Killer. If he exists, he's one of the world's most prolific murderers.
Wow.
So this theory, you might be surprised, it's been around for decades.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this back when I was like in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And it's still sparking debates.
I can see why. I mean, it really makes you question what we think we know.
So tell me, where'd this creepy smiley face killer name even come from?
Well, the theory started back in 1997 with these two NYPD detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte.
Okay.
They were looking into the disappearance of Patrick McNeil, 21-year-old, who vanished after a night out in Manhattan.
So this all started in New York City.
You got it.
I always thought this was more of a Midwest thing.
It did spread to the Midwest, but it did start in New York.
Okay.
So McNeil, his body was found like 2 months after he disappeared,
Oh, wow.
miles away in New York Harbor. They officially said it was an accidental drowning.
Okay.
But detectives Gannon and Duarte, they weren't convinced.
What made them think it was something more? More than just a tragic accident?
Well, while they were looking at other cases of, young men found drowned, they started to see these similarities that were unsettling.
Hmm.
And one thing that kept popping up was smiley face graffiti near the scenes.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like back in the late 90s, before smiley faces were like everywhere.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see how that would like raise a red flag.
Yeah.
So were there other similarities besides just the smiley faces?
Yeah, a lot of the victims had this almost like a profile, white college-aged men,
Hmm?
athletic, good-looking, academically successful.
Really?
Yeah. And so the detective started to think that, maybe somebody was like targeting this kind of guy.
Right. Targeting them. Like why?
Well, one theory was jealousy.
Jealousy leading to murder. That sounds a little, I don't know, simple for something so complex.
Yeah, well, that was just one early theory. As they went deeper, they actually thought maybe it wasn't just one killer,
Oh, wow.
maybe a whole group of them.
Like a gang of smiley face killers.
Yeah.
Wow, that's scary. Why did they jump to that?
Some of the deaths happened on the same night, but in different states.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of spread it's hard to do with just one person. They were so dedicated to this theory that, they were even using their own money to keep investigating when no one else would support it.
Wow, that's serious commitment.
It is.
But if they were so sure, why didn't anyone else take them seriously?
Well, that's where the controversy comes in.
Okay.
See, the FBI and most police departments, they say there is no smiley face killer.
Really?
They say these are mostly just, accidental drownings.
So they just wrote it all off as a series of tragic accidents, just like that.
Well, not exactly.
Right.
There were investigations.
Right.
But the Center for Homicide Research, they actually publish a whole report
Okay.
called Drowning the Smiley Face Theory.
Hmm.
And it just debunked the whole thing.
So what were their main arguments against it?
Their report had like 18 different reasons, but two of the big ones were first, smiley faces.
Yeah.
They're common graffiti, especially among, young people. So finding them near these scenes, it might just be coincidence.
Hmm.
And second, murder by drowning. Super rare. Like statistically, it's just not likely that so many young men would be murdered that way.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. But I don't know, there's still something about this whole thing,
I get it.
It's intriguing.
You're not alone. Even though officials deny it, the smiley face killer theory still gets a lot of attention and debate.
It does.
In fact, back in 2008, a congressman from Wisconsin actually asked the FBI to investigate the theory.
Really, a congressman.
Yeah, it's a case full of twists and turns.
Wow.
Then, in 2016, there was this death of a guy named Matthew Genovese in Hoboken, New Jersey,
Okay.
and it reignited public concern.
Hmm.
See, his death, it had all the classic signs of a smiley face killer case, even though there were no signs of foul play.
So even though the detectives had kind of dropped the theory by 2012, this new case brought it all back.
Exactly. And this Genovese case, it shows how personal this mystery is. The families of these victims, a lot of them, they're online and they're still searching for answers. They want to believe that their loved one's death wasn't just an accident.
I get it. If it were my child, I'd want answers too.
Yeah,
That kind of uncertainty, that grief.
it's tough.
It's a lot. So why do you think this theory still has such a hold on people, even after all these years and official denials?
It's a few things, I think. Part of it is that we as humans, we want to find meaning in tragedy.
Hmm.
We want to believe there's a reason, even if it's a bad one, for why these seemingly random deaths happened.
It's like we're wired to, connect the dots to look for patterns, especially when it's something as scary as a serial killer.
Exactly. And you can't forget about the media and pop culture.
Right.
They've definitely played a role in keeping this mystery alive.
Yeah. Books, documentaries.
You name it,
It's everywhere. It's almost like the more we talk about it.
the more real it seems.
Yeah. Even if the evidence isn't really there.
That's an important point.
Hmm.
We really need to be careful about the information we're taking in and how it's shaping what we think about this case.
You're right. It's easy to get swept up in all the, sensationalism.
Uh-huh.
But we got to be critical thinkers.
We do.
Okay, so we need to look at the evidence, and we need to look at it carefully. So let's start with, what were the key pieces of evidence that made those detectives come up with this theory in the first place?
Well, they were looking at very specific details in the graffiti.
Right.
Not just any smiley face. They were looking at the style, the size, even where it was compared to the water.
Wow.
They even brought in a forensic graphologist.
A what?
A forensic graphologist. It's an expert in handwriting analysis.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So they were hoping to find, patterns in how those smiley faces were drawn.
Exactly. Like a fingerprint, but for handwriting.
Wow. Okay, so did they find anything? Did it support the theory?
Unfortunately, the results of what the graphologist found haven't been made public.
Really?
Yeah, and that lack of transparency is actually one of the things that frustrates people who are looking for more evidence.
I bet. It's frustrating for me. So we have these specific smiley faces, we have this victim profile, and then we have the detective's gut feeling. But was there anything else, anything more solid that connected these deaths?
Well, that's one of the biggest points of contention.
Okay.
Critics of the theory, especially that Center for Homicide Research, they say that the detectives never showed any direct evidence that connected these deaths, like to one person or a group.
So it was all circumstantial.
Pretty much. No DNA, no witnesses, no confessions.
Wow.
The detectives relied on the pattern of the victims, the smiley faces being nearby, and their own intuition. But without hard proof, like forensic evidence or eyewitnesses, the theory is still just speculation.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be a big problem for building a strong case.
It is.
But there are some criminologists who support the smiley face killer theory, right?
There are.
So what are their arguments?
They look at the number of similar deaths in such a short time.
Okay.
They say it's statistically unlikely that all these young men fitting this very specific profile would drown accidentally. The odds, they argue, are just too crazy for it to be random chance.
So they're basically saying it's just too much of a coincidence to ignore.
Exactly. And they also point out that a lot of these deaths happened near bars and social gatherings.
Right.
Places where these young men might have been vulnerable, maybe drunk, separated from their friends. And that feeds into the idea that they were targeted when they were, not at their best.
Okay, that does add another layer of, suspicion to it all.
It does.
But even if we say, okay, maybe these deaths weren't just accidents, the question of why still hangs there.
It does.
Why target these particular guys?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one that even Gannon and Duarte haven't been able to answer definitively. Their early thought about jealousy, it's understandable, but it doesn't really explain the level of, organization it would take to pull off so many killings.
Yeah.
Especially across multiple states.
Especially if we're talking about a gang.
Right. That level of, sophistication and secrecy, it's hard to imagine.
It is.
And there's been zero evidence to support any kind of criminal group that would have the resources or the motive to do something this complex.
So the motive, if there even is one, remains a total mystery.
It does.
We're stuck, we've got these weird similarities, but no real proof of a crime and no clear motives.
Right.
It's like we're trying to do a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
That's a great way to put it. It's this constant back and forth between wanting a simple explanation and the reality that we just don't have all the answers. And when we don't have those answers, that's when speculation and conspiracy theories start to pop up. And the internet.
Oh, yeah?
The internet is like a breeding ground for all that.
Right.
And it's created all sorts of ideas about the smiley face killer, some of them pretty out there.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, there are theories about satanic cults, government experiments gone wrong, even copycat killers inspired by the original theory.
Oh, no.
It's hard to sort out what's real and what's not with all this misinformation and conjecture flying around.
Yeah, it's like everyone has their own theory, and the internet gives them all a platform to shout it from, so it's hard to know what to believe. But this brings us back to the beginning.
Hmm.
Why are we so drawn to these unsolved mysteries? And why is this smiley face killer theory, why does it grab people's attention so much?
That's a great question, and it deserves its own deep dive.
Okay,
Let's look at that after a quick break.
so we talked about the smiley face killer theory, a pattern of deaths, the smiley faces, those dedicated detectives who everyone doubted.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about us. Why are we so fascinated by these unsolved mysteries? What is it about not knowing that pulls us in?
Yeah, that's a question that's been around forever. I think it really comes down to wanting to make sense of everything around us.
Mm.
We look for patterns, for explanations.
Mm.
When something seems as random as these deaths, our brains, they just try to connect the dots.
So it's like we're trying to cope with how random life can be.
Yeah.
We come up with a story, even if it's a dark one, to make things feel less chaotic, less out of control.
Exactly. And the smiley face killer theory, it's a good story. It's like a whodunit, right? Mysterious bad guy, innocent victims, and all these clues. It plays on our fears and it makes us want to solve the puzzle.
Like a real-life detective novel, but we can't put it down.
Exactly. There's this feeling of like satisfaction when you solve a puzzle. And this theory, it's a tough puzzle. But it's not just about that intellectual thrill. There's something else, something deeper, something emotional.
Are you talking about like the fear that there might be this person out there hurting these guys?
Yeah, that's part of it. The smiley face killer, whether it's real or not, it represents those fears we have about being vulnerable,
Yeah.
about dying. It reminds us that even when things seem safe, danger could be right there. And for the families of the victims, it's not just a story. This fear, it's real.
Right, they've lost someone, often with no explanation. And this theory might be an answer.
Yeah, a way to make sense of your grief.
It gives them someone to blame. Maybe even a little hope that their loved one's death wasn't just some random thing.
Exactly. It turns their grief into something they can act on. They can search for answers, for someone to be held accountable.
Yeah, and they're not alone. Like we talked about before, there are all these people online who are also looking into this.
That's right. These online communities, they become part of that search for the truth. They put their heads together, they look at evidence, they share theories.
It's a real community.
It is. And they support those families who feel like they're not being heard by the police or the public.
Yeah. It's amazing how the internet has changed things.
It has. It's given everyone a voice, a way to participate in investigations.
Like back in the day, that was just for the police.
Right.
But now, anyone can get involved. It's powerful, but it also means we need to be careful.
We do.
With so much information out there, how do we know what's real?
Well, first, we need to know our own biases. What do we already think about this case? Are we ready to believe in the smiley face killer, or are we doubtful? Once we know where we stand, we can start to look at the information more critically.
Okay, so we need to be aware of what we're bringing to the table, our own opinions.
Yeah. What else can we do to be more careful?
Well, don't just read the headlines.
Right. Go deeper.
If they mention a study or a report, read the whole thing yourself. Look for inconsistencies. Consider other explanations. Don't be afraid to question what you're being told.
Exactly. Being a little skeptical is important, especially now with so much information out there. And with something as complex as the smiley face killer, critical thinking is super important.
You're right. We've been talking a lot about the theories and all that. But what about the people affected?
Right. We can't forget about them.
The victims and their families, they're still searching for answers.
It's a vital part of this whole thing. It's easy to get caught up in the debate, but we can't forget that for each of these cases, there's a family that's hurting.
These aren't just statistics or data points on a map.
No.
They're real people with names and faces and stories.
And their stories need to be told.
Absolutely. Let's shift gears and really focus on the human side of this mystery. You know, it's easy to get lost in all the theories
Right.
and the debates about the smiley face killer,
Yeah.
but we can't forget the real people.
No, absolutely not.
The ones who've lived through this.
Yeah.
For those families, the ones who lost those young men.
Right.
It's not just some theory
No, it's their lives.
or a true crime story.
You're real.
It's a tragedy.
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine that pain.
It's unimaginable.
That not knowing
Yeah.
the official story, accidental drowning.
Right.
It might be enough for some people,
Maybe.
but for others,
It leaves questions.
it leaves doubt.
Yeah, you're always wondering.
Like there's more to it.
Exactly.
And that's where this theory, The smiley face killer theory.
Mm.
Even though we don't have solid evidence,
Right.
it gives a different kind of closure.
It does.
It's disturbing, but it's closure.
Yeah, it suggests that it wasn't random.
That their loved one wasn't just a victim of circumstance.
That there was something more sinister at play.
It's a scary thought.
It is.
But for some, it might be easier than the alternative.
Than thinking it was just a meaningless accident.
Yeah, it gives them a reason for their grief.
A reason to fight.
Like a target, a villain,
Someone to blame.
a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe,
He wasn't random.
it wasn't pointless.
They want justice.
And they're not the only ones, right?
No, not at all.
We talked about the online communities.
Right, the internet sleuths.
They're a part of this too.
Absolutely.
All those people working together, looking for the truth.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Pooling resources, looking at the evidence, sharing theories.
A real community effort.
They become like an extension of the families.
Yeah, in a way.
Supporting each other.
Providing a space for those who feel ignored.
By the police, by the public.
It shows how powerful the internet can be.
It does.
In the right hands, it can be a tool for good.
Like a way for ordinary people to get involved.
To help solve these cases.
Like citizen detectives.
Exactly.
But it's not just about curiosity, right?
No.
Some of these people, they feel a real connection to the families.
They want to help bring closure.
They want to make a difference.
It's inspiring, you know.
It is.
Even when faced with tragedy, people still want to help.
It reminds us that we're not alone.
We're all connected.
And that even in the darkest times,
There's still hope.
there's still compassion.
Yeah.
Well, we've explored a lot today
We have.
about the smiley face killer theory.
The evidence, the arguments,
The media, the online world.
the human impact.
But now it's your turn.
What do you think?
What do you make of all this? Could there be more to this story? Is there something we're missing? Or is it just our need for an answer that's making us see connections where there are none? Let us know your thoughts, and thanks for joining us for this deep dive.